Gold Rush exclusive. Lewis crew Johnny Stanz's incredible story of serving in Afghanistan, the next gold rush for Discovery this Friday. We get an intimate behind the scenes with one of Fred Lewis' men named Johnny Stanz, a war veteran who had little to no chance of walking or talking after a horrific explosion in Afghanistan. You will meet Stanz, who is featured below in TV shows as exclusive clip. It's a hot stopper. The core cast includes Parker Schnebel, Rick Ness, and Tony Beats. Fred Lewis is the new kid on the gold mining block. He's served with Parker on Gold Rush, Parker's trails the last 3 seasons. Fred hired Johnny as part of his crew in his first foray into mining. Fred's team includes veterans Kendall Madden, who served in the Air Force, Stuart McKenzie, a former infantry sniper whose hand was blown off by a roadside bomb then reattached. Stuart is now a bodybuilder. Also part of the Lewis crew is Stephen Generally, a Green Beret who served for 26 years with 12 deployments. Kyle Pletzk, whose pelvis was shattered in a rollover accident in Afghanistan, and our clip subject, John Stanz, a former Marine Raider with 2 Purple Hearts who was in a coma after being blown up by a roadside bomb. Johnny was given a 0% chance of living, and they said he'd never talk. Stanz is in our clip below, as he tells us about his path to working as a gold miner, which still shocks everyone who knew his story. The narrator sets the mood as he shares the background. After leaving the Marines on a medical discharge, Stanz is looking for a new direction in his life. Enter Fred Lewis, who has taken him on for mining. Stanz is hard at work and says, "I had to retire after 10 years in the Marine Corps when I got a really bad brain injury from getting blown up in Afghanistan by a roadside bomb. I mean, I was incredibly lucky because 2 guys in the vehicle died immediately." He shows the graphic imagery captured on his cell phone and says, "I actually got some pictures on my phone. I was in the bed of the truck manning the squad automatic weapon when the bomb went off." Johnny was hurt so bad that the doctors rated his chance of walking or talking again at 0. He concedes that he is not fully healed. He says, "Still not 100%, but definitely better than I could be, and look at me, gold mining. How many people can say that? I have 0% experience mining gold, mining anything. But started to think, man, I could strike it rich." He is working on something with Fred as he gets some direction and follows up his thought. He says, "This job is gonna prove definitely to be pretty tricky. I mean, for a guy with a brain injury that's never mined before, it's gonna be a freaking task, but I like challenges. Why would I have become special operations in the Marine Corps if I didn't like challenges?" As Fred talks him through the task, an unforeseen calamity happens right as cameras are rolling. Stanz has either fallen or collapsed during the filming of his segment. Luckily for him, Lewis is a trained medic. Hopefully, the prognosis is good and he will recover. Gold Rush airs Fridays at 9 p.m. on Discovery. Gold Rush exclusive. Lewis crew Johnny Stanz's incredible story of serving in Afghanistan. When you think of the name Johnny Stanz, the first image that may come to mind might be a rugged prospector or a miner braving the tough terrain of the Alaskan wilderness. After all, Johnny Stanz is part of the cast of the hit Discovery Channel show Gold Rush, where the hard-nosed individuals looking for gold in the unforgiving wilderness of Alaska and the Yukon often face peril, exhaustion, and setbacks that seem almost impossible to overcome. But what many fans of the show might not know is that Johnny's story goes far beyond the boundaries of the goldfields. Before he became a prominent figure on Gold Rush's Lewis crew, Stanz's life was shaped by something much more dangerous and high stakes than any gold vein or mining operation. His story begins in the heat of combat, serving as a soldier in Afghanistan. His experiences during his deployment have shaped who he is today and the resilience he carries with him every day. Johnny's journey to the rugged, gold-filled hills of Alaska began thousands of miles away on the war-torn soils of Afghanistan, where his life took a turn he never expected. The early days of service born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, Johnny Stanz was never someone to shy away from a challenge. Growing up in a small, close-knit community, he learned the values of hard work, discipline, and perseverance from a young age. But despite the traditional path many in his community took, college, work, family, Johnny felt a pull toward something more. He wanted to do something that would make a difference, something bigger than himself. After high school, Johnny enlisted in the U.S. Army, driven by a sense of duty and a desire to serve his country. In the mid-2000s, as the war on terror raged on, couldn't have been higher. The decision to serve in Afghanistan wasn't an easy one. Johnny's family had its worries, just like any parent would when sending their child into a war zone. But Johnny was determined to serve, driven by a sense of responsibility and a belief in the cause he was supporting. Little did he know, his time in Afghanistan would leave an indelible mark on his life and reshape his perspective in ways he could never have anticipated. Life in Afghanistan. Johnny's deployment in Afghanistan was nothing short of intense. He was stationed in a remote part of the country, far from the safety and comfort of the main military bases. His unit faced constant danger as they navigated treacherous terrain and engaged in missions to secure key areas from insurgent forces. Every day was a battle not just for survival, but for the security of the country they were sent to protect. Johnny recalls the constant tension, the moments of calm that were always shattered by sudden violence, and the brotherhood that developed among the soldiers. He was part of a unit tasked with training Afghan forces, helping them become self-sufficient and able to protect their country. It wasn't just about combat. There were days where they worked alongside locals, assisting in building infrastructure or providing medical aid to those in need. These moments stood in stark contrast to the battles they fought, offering a glimpse of the human side of war and the ways in which the soldiers could make a tangible impact beyond the front lines. But the brutality of war was never far away. Johnny and his unit encountered life-threatening situations regularly, from roadside bombs to ambushes. One particularly harrowing day, Johnny's convoy was attacked by insurgents. The sound of gunfire and explosions filled the air as Johnny and his fellow soldiers fought back, knowing that their lives, and the lives of those around them, were in constant jeopardy. The worst part of combat isn't necessarily the danger, Johnny explains. It's the fear of not knowing if you'll make it out. It's the thought that you might not get to go back to your family, your friends, or your home. It's the uncertainty that weighs on you every single day. One of the most defining moments of Johnny's service came during a particularly intense firefight. As the enemy closed in, Johnny's unit found themselves pinned down, with few options for escape. The tension was unbearable, and time seemed to stretch for what felt like an eternity. In that moment, Johnny's training and instinct kicked in, and he managed to lead his comrades to safety, moving through enemy lines with strategic precision. Though the mission was ultimately successful, the emotional toll it took on him was profound. "I'll never forget the faces of the soldiers I was with that day," Johnny reflects. "We all knew how close we came to losing someone. The bond we had was forged in those moments of chaos and fear, and I think that's what kept us going. We didn't want to let each other down." The road to recovery. After several grueling months of combat, Johnny's deployment came to an end. The return home was both a relief and a challenge. On one hand, he was thrilled to be back with his loved ones, to be safe once again. But on the other hand, the psychological scars of war were not so easily healed. Like many soldiers, Johnny found it difficult to adjust to civilian life after returning from Afghanistan. The weight of the experiences he lived through began to settle in, and the transition back to normal life wasn't as smooth as he had hoped. Johnny struggled with feelings of isolation, depression, and anxiety, emotions that are all too common among veterans. It wasn't just the memories of combat that haunted him. It was also the struggle of coming to terms with the way war had changed him. But Johnny wasn't one to shy away from a challenge. Just as he had pushed through the adversity of Afghanistan, he was determined to tackle the emotional and mental challenges of returning home. With the support of his family, friends, and fellow veterans, Johnny sought professional help to manage his PTSD and the trauma he had experienced. He took time to focus on his mental and physical health, learning to cope with his emotions and find new ways to heal. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the weight of his past seemed unbearable. But Johnny's resilience continued to shine through. A new chapter in Alaska was during this period of recovery that Johnny found himself in Alaska. Like many others, he had long been fascinated by the rugged landscapes of the lost frontier, the wild and untamed spirit of the land resonating with him in a way that felt familiar. Johnny had always been drawn to the outdoors, but it was in Alaska that he found a new sense of purpose. After a series of conversations with his close friend and Gold Rush star, Lewis, Johnny decided to take a leap of faith and join the Gold Rush crew. Alaska.